the big question I get asked all the time by younger people is, how did you get into becoming an expedition leader? How do you go about it? Why did you decide to do it? And all these things, because it's not exactly a normal kind of career choice for most sane people.
Yeah, and also
stability and money.
Yeah.
So so we've done. I did 3 years, maybe 4 years of British exploring. We did Namibia 3 or 4 times. We did Sinai once. We did. Then we ran the expedition leadership program, which I thought was a fantastic program. Which I'm sad that kind of fizzled out a bit. But, I'm sure we'll resurrect that at some point. And then we did Jordan, Footsteps of Lawrence, with the 2127 squadron, wasn't it?
427 Biggin Hill Air Cadets. Yeah, give them a bit of a.
And then after that, we've done all sorts of stuff together. And we did, paramotor pilots first aid courses, which were on a big paramotor trip in Namibia last year. So that's kind of about us too. Well, it's about me, and there's James. You kind of fill in a bit more.
Yeah, so I'm James Dyer. I've been an expedition leader since I was about 24, 25, so about 25, 26 years ago. I've experienced the period of my time within that was full-time, so full-time leading and guiding expeditions commercially and for the schools education market for a good number of years in there. I spent 5 years at British Exploring as the head of operations during a period of real change, which was great. Still involved with them as an organisation, but I operate with do a whole load of things now, mainly around safety in remote environments. So whether that's delivering safety advisory work for a range of organisations, some technical advisory stuff for some expedition companies. Pick and choose my guiding now, I suppose, and still help with the development of expeditions, and predominantly around things like training and training and development of both expedition leaders, but also good humans in many ways who can developing the humans to be better leaders, or some of the technical skills to operate, whether that's first aid or safety, or they're all in there really. I suppose it's the intersection between safety, leadership, and remote environments. And some lessons learned in that. But yeah, I get asked the similar sort of questions. How did you get into it? I always find them quite hard because there's no straight lines in this career. And I'm having the weird existential crisis at the moment where one of my sons has turned around and said he wants to become an outdoor practitioner. So I'm now like, oh, how do I facilitate and help, or pass on some worldly advice from the last 25 years or whatever to how I end up being where I end up. But as I said, there's no straight lines to it. So he's going to have to carve his own route and find his own.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Is there's no you can't do a degree in this. Well, you probably can these days, but we didn't, and it certainly wasn't. You had to kind of pick your own path through it. I mean, I must get 2 emails a month asking me this. How do I get into it? What do I do? So I always say that that obviously there's qualifications that are a big help. Outdoor first aid and so on and so forth. But it's just getting your toe in the door. But I mean, the big question is when did you feel that you knew this was the path for you, or was it something more organic? Did it happen over a period, a couple of years?
That is the big existential question, and I think that's part of why it was something we could definitely explore today, which might help me thinking about how I communicate some of that to somebody else. But I'll put it down.
That's the tricky bit.
Yeah, what makes us adventurous, and then how does that then lead us to find a career? Because I think for me, looking back, I never thought this would last for 25 years. Something I was going to do at a particular time, and I've seen over the years lots of people come in very enthusiastic, very with all the modern things, whatever that era was, and then after a few years, the things happen, life changes. They decide they want to get inverted commas proper job, and they go into teaching, or they go off into it's nothing to do with it, nothing to do with the outdoors. Paramedics, I've seen people go off to become paramedics. I've seen them go off and do all sorts of things and set up their own businesses, go elsewhere, and or have children. Life changes, get married, or move away with a partner and change their life and bits, go into academia. Like, I've seen people do all sorts who were, when they first came into the sector, were like, they were the latest hot thing. They were pushing for all the work. They were networking their asses off, but I feel strange that it just, how, looking back over 25 years, it still managed to keep earning a living in some way, shape or form. So I'm wondering whether it's less about the career path, or whether how big your commitment is to living an adventurous life.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's going back to those crossroads in life that you come to, the easy path, the grown-up path, the sensible path, and then way, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, but then that also leads to people thinking that we don't do a proper job, and you must just be out having fun all the time. So
So interesting. So I mean, was there a specific crossroads in your life, or that had a paradigm shift on everything, or was it over a course of many years had small influences on you?
So I thought about this when we were sharing some notes, and I thought about this prior to today, and I still haven't quite got to the bottom of the why do I live an adventurous life thing, because I don't think I was very adventurous as a child, particularly. Yeah. I don't think we didn't travel overseas at all when I was a kid. Went on holidays, but they were all in the UK. Wasn't really encouraged to do lots of sort of adventurous things. I joined the Air Cadets as a teenager. That exposed me to things like, Duke of Edinburgh's award, that and going on military exercises and things like that. So I think that probably helped find some of those things. But it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I started to, push out a little bit more. And I was doing some work in a different industry where there was a couple of guys that were ex-forces.
In the outdoor centre.
Sorry?
That was when you were in the outdoor centre.
No, before that, when I was working in stunts, when I was working in TV and film. And I'd met some guys, and then we would go up to North Wales and do a bit of personal climbing, and I just went along and enjoyed it, and it was quite exciting and thrilling, and made something in your gut go, oh yeah, definitely want to be up for that, and sort of slept under vans, bivvy bags, and that sort of stuff, and used to get trains from places to Bangor and then hitchhike into North Wales to go climbing or what have you, with gear that I borrowed off of them, and so that's all I suppose was an extension of what I'd done in the cadets. And then some point, and it's an interesting area to explore. We talked about the concept around mentors, and I know we'll hopefully come back to that. But I ended up doing some youth work in London, and started helping out with running Duke of Edinburgh Award for a youth agency that worked in Borough. And then that sort of put me on the outdoor educator pathway. But so I sort of like had that as a sort of, I thought that would be the career, and it's fairly well established routes into outdoor education, becoming an outdoor instructor, working in outdoor centres, working as a freelancer. Those sort of things were common, and they're still the same, still similar now in that respect, to get a job in as an outdoor practitioner. Not very well paid. Yeah. The value it might give, but it gave me a really good grounding. But it wasn't actually until, and this is what comes back to your original point, I was in my, at 29, I'd been married and got divorced. I was getting divorced. And I at some point, about a year or so after that happened, and I wasn't in a particularly great place, I suppose. Like, lots of divorce isn't very pretty. I was having, trying to get access to my kids, from that marriage. the fallout of it all. And I just went, fuck it, I think, is what I sort of think I felt in my head. And instead of trying to keep chasing the corporate buck in the outdoor world, even though it's not really corporate money, I just went, I'd done a few overseas expeditions, led a few overseas expeditions, particularly for the schools market, and sort of touched my toe into the adult mountain expedition market. And I just went, I'm just going to do that full time. I didn't have anywhere to live particularly. I was sort of crashing on a mate's floor in South London, my mum and dad's house. I was all over the place really in terms of that. So didn't have any ties. And then I just went,
that's the thing, it's not a deal really, because you're not having, suddenly you've got no ties. You said you've got no major commitments.
Yeah.
And you're in a kind of frame of mind that says, fuck it, I want to go and have some adventure. And so that'd be perfect. You can then go and take these jobs in the middle of nowhere for 50 quid a week.
Yeah, exactly. And absolutely right. And this is the thing I sometimes find with people when they talk to you about it. They seem to think that because you did it full time professionally, you were making big bucks, but it wasn't. You were surviving, and I was leading back-to-back trips. It was paying my accommodation and flights to travel the world. And for about 5 years.
Back-to-back trips, you don't need accommodation. You don't need to go to pay for your Tesco's food bill. Don't need to pay for heat and light. You don't need to pay for your Wi-Fi. Yeah. You just, all you're doing is paying for your beer on your day off, and that's it.
Yeah, and so I think that was the tipping point. I didn't think there was a tipping point, and I really thought about it, and that probably was that utter commitment to taking the leap that I really dreamt about, which was the overseas expeditions and being on overseas expeditions. I've been following the sort of corporate, the outdoor instructor traditional route, I suppose, to a certain extent, and then I just went, well, actually, now I don't have to do that. Maybe there's a different route, and it helped me find out who I was and what I'm about as an adult, I suppose, as a grown up. Which I think prior to that, even though I'd been,
what age were you then?
Managing outdoor centre, married, kids, all that, I still hadn't really found out who I was within all that. So
what age was that?
I think that was probably when I was about. Well, I broke up with my former wife when I was 29, 30.
Okay. So about 30. So I had a similar epiphany. I think similar age.
Yeah. What were you doing before that? What was your route in?
Well, I think I subliminally made lots and lots of life choices, based on adventure rather than common sense. But I didn't really realise I was doing it. I mean, we'll go back to mentorship in a bit, or maybe in another chat. But I'd worked for Ridgway for 2 seasons up there. That taught me a lot. But I knew that I didn't want to go into the army because I hated the guys who I was working with up there. Well, they hated me and they bullied me, and they were absolute wankers. And I thought, well, the last thing I want to do is spend another 5 years with a bunch of twats like that. But I then knew that the world was a big place, and I knew that I hated school, apart from the cadets, as we discussed. That was the only good fun part. And so I kept making life choices based on kind of adventurous, decisions. And that, I got a job on a cruise ship because I love traveling. And then I became a photographer, and I traveled the world as a photographer. And I realized that actually I love the travel as much as the photography.
Yeah.
And then and then I had my great paradigm shift was when I ended up in Namibia on a complete whim. I got a fax in the middle of the night from Mark, saying, dig out your press card, give it to this guy, he'll give you a free flight to Namibia, see you Friday. That was it. I didn't even, I sent him my press card. They sent me, a plane ticket, with all the carbon copies and all the bits of paper. Didn't even know where Namibia was. I was just like, this is going to be fun.
I like your point about doing things on whims, not necessarily whims, but making choices, and that intersection of, like, you have a choice. You can do the sensible route or you do the adventurous route. And I think that resonates with things, especially choices you may have through your life, where you may have taken this route, or you sometimes took that route and then had to then the next decision was again the next branch, the same two. But that point about finding ways of traveling the world, because I definitely, even as a kid, I wanted to see the world, and sort of there's a conscious decision to sort of find somewhere that might pay you to travel the world, and I resonate with that. because I think that ultimately
Yeah,
comes back to that hub of why do we adventure when it's got nothing. I love guiding people. I love leading people. I love people achieving great things and helping them do that. Keeping people
yeah,
safe is great. Making TV programs is great because you're working with teams of people to create something.
yeah,
Taking scientists into the jungle or the bush for them to do their science work is amazing because then you can sort of vicariously, be part of something.
yeah.
But actually, another bit is about that idea of seeing the world because that changes your view on everything, changes your view on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's experiencing life and the world and cultures and seeing new things and being amazed when you wake up in the morning or go to bed at night or whatever,
Yeah, and,
And
and sort of what we do with with youth expeditions, trying to use that as a vehicle to help young people develop. But actually, part of that is about us develop. My political views have been shaped by my travel. My view of the world has been shaped. My relationships with people. You know,
yeah,
text messages from guides in Africa texting you and asking how your family are over Christmas and stuff. Like friendship groups, massive. And I know you're obviously somewhere
yeah.
at the moment,
Well,
so.
I'm sitting in the Sinai at the minute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with friends,
Mind bottle.
you know, yeah, with friends and people like that. So it's
Yeah,
that.
so it is amazing. So it is, but it's interesting that I if you have two decisions to make, normally the tough one is generally speaking probably the better decision or the better route to take.
Yeah, and it plays with that idea in humans of in life where we come to these junctions and we have to make a decision, but but one of those decisions is relatively easy and safe, and the other one is riskier and
It's the
harder.
unknown. It's the leap into the unknown, like getting onto a flight. Called Namibia. I didn't even know where it was. I'm trying to possibly meet a mate of mine, 6,000 kilometers away, on Friday afternoon.
And that led to you to do what? How did that then lead? How was that a junction for you? How did that lead you
Well,
into?
then I suddenly, then completely kind of fell in love with Namibia, and then Mark, we drove around for a couple of months, and then I stayed on because again, back to that financial thing, it was actually cheaper for me to stay in Namibia than it was to come back to London. And so then I ended up hitchhiking around the whole of Namibia, and then in the process of that, I met a Canadian guy called Alan Kirby who owned a safari company called Wild Dog Safaris, and he said, "So Sam, do you want to become a safari guide?" I said, "Fuck yeah." And yeah, and that was absolutely without hesitation, and that was a massive crossroads in my life, and then from there that spiraled off, or that road led to you know um, all sorts of crazy, amazing adventures. But I remember I had a month back in London, and just going back to this easy choice, difficult choice. I came back to London, rented the flat, sold the car, put all my gear away, and I dumped the girlfriend. I don't know, I can't remember. Um, um, but there was loads of people saying to me, "You can't do that. You can't just go and be a safari guide in Africa." I said, "Well, why not?"
I'd love to have been a safari guide. I think that would have been. I never knew it existed as
Yeah.
a thing, and yeah, no, I think I still have this idea that I'd love to go and do that. I think that, yeah, that would have been the dream.
I'm going to do a course in South Africa for Gaza course, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's your phase one. So yeah, so that was yeah, again, another choice, another life choice. I was going to go and live in a new country, learn a whole new career. I had to do 3 years of exams to get my ticket. Although did the exams while I was working, I learned all sorts of amazing stuff, met all sorts of amazing people, saw all sorts of amazing stuff. Completely fell in love with the place, and we still do lots of stuff there. And then and then we ended up doing more and more, getting away from more of the kind of commercial kind of safaris into more adventurous expeditions in Namibia, because it has so much
Yeah,
potential.
yeah, amazing.
But that was the point for me. Those are the 2 points. I think everything else was kind of decisions I wasn't really making. It was just kind of a gut feeling. But those two decisions of getting on that flight on an Air Namibia flight this plane was falling to pieces, and then saying yes to Alan Kirby. I think those were the two, those were the two of the biggest kind of crossroads in my life, that led to all sorts of amazing things.
It's interesting when people ask you, how did you do it? How does that make you feel when people ask you? Do you find it difficult to answer that, or because it's really hard to say to somebody, "Oh, just wait till the decision comes in front of you, and you'll know which way to take."
Yeah, well, they probably won't. That's the problem.
That's hard for someone to conceptualize.
That's the thing. It is really difficult. So that's why I always say, look, go and volunteer, get your first aid ticket under your belt at least, because that's a minimum requirement, and see how far you can go. Go to Explore Weekend at the RGS, go and hang out, go to join the SES, go and do talks, go and network, and so on and so forth, and then, keep in touch. As I always say, you never know.
Yeah. I think that's it. It's hard to say to someone, well, your journey is going to be uniquely yours in this. No one's got a straight line into this business or into this world. And even if you just did it for a bit, then that's fine as well, because it's just as valid as long as you do it well.
It's not A, B, C, D, E, F. It's A, C, D, Z.
Yeah.
You kind of finally, you make your way there, or not, as life changes. If you have kids and suddenly you've got to go and do something else.
Or have kids and carry on. Well, yeah, but I think that leads to some of the conversations we've had before, where people say, well, people do drop out because their life changes, and they have stuff happens in their personal life that then changes how their perceptions of it. And I've always tried not to allow the changes in my personal life to affect the adventurousness of my spirit, I suppose, and also trying to think about the things you could do that make you a bit of money, and I think. Yeah, it's interesting because, I thought so obviously I remarried, had more children later on, and when they were little, I just carried on doing the same thing. I was away, but I was coming back to somewhere, which changes the dynamic somewhat.
Yeah.
But when they were little, it didn't seem to bother them as such. It was just it was just the world they were born into, and I suppose that's continued. There has been times where I think they felt it more, but I think it's part and parcel of, I've become very good at remote parenting. It's amazing what you can do on FaceTime.
Yeah,
I
exactly. But imagine what it was like. When we were youngsters, it was, an international phone call was mind-blowingly expensive. You might do it once a month, email.
I remember sitting on a street in Thailand, in Bangkok, on a stall, like a little wooden stall outside some bloke's shop, getting him to. He had one phone. It was screwed to a wooden post, and he would make the phone call, and I had to phone like my mum's house, and speak to people down the phone. From Thailand. And now compare that to now, you get an eSIM, and you're in contact the whole time you're in places. I was in a canyon in Bali about a month and a bit ago, filming a sequence, and I was on WhatsApp with my wife. It's I can run your business.
Now has like maybe 60-70% coverage.
Yeah.
And that's the second least populous country in the world.
In Namibia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, they want people promoted. They want people sending lovely pictures of Namibia and posting stuff all the time. So they put the infrastructure in.
Yeah, and I think it's but also it's just that change. 30 years. If we both been looking at the world like that for 30 years, and seeing those changes, it has, but it does almost seem a little bit easier. Like nowadays, you barely travel with cash. I can't remember the last time I went to actually saying that, I did go to an exchange in an airport recently, but I don't turn up in country with a load of dollars.
Mate, have you?
And have to go to an exchange booth to get it out. You go to an ATM and get it out, and you have been able to do that for a long time. Now, I remember standing in a massive queue because they fill up the ATMs once a month or something like that, or once a week, and then they were gone within a day. The ATMs were emptied. So there was a massive queue to get to the ATM. But nowadays, everything's paid on card. You can,
Never travelers checks.
yeah, well, travelers checks. Yeah, absolutely. And now you just go with a banking card from a like Revolut or
Yeah, online or whatever. Yeah.
or any of the other sort of like travel cards. I've Revolut's on my phone, and you just tap and
Yeah.
you barely have any money, I barely have any cash.
It has, the dynamics has changed, and also I think what was interesting is how, especially with youth or young people's adventure trips, and how COVID and technology really skewed the dynamics of that or changed it. Because remember, gap years were like everybody, it was a big thing. Every young person has to do a gap year either after college or after school before college, and that whole concept is now, they still do it, but it's certainly not as important for young people anymore. Their online presence is more important than or exploring their online is more important than exploring the world. I feel that
yeah, they explore the world.
certainly the people of our generation, the denture venturers, are they're more open to international travel and adventure than a lot of young people are.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in that. I think they travel differently. So even recently, I was talking to some travellers in Vietnam, at youngsters, young English travellers, and they sort of they are more digitally connected. So therefore, we were on a night coach, and one of them was FaceTiming their mum back in the UK. Like, the idea of going on a gap year 20, 30 years ago was about disconnecting, going off, finding yourself, traveling the world. Now it's shareable. It's you came back and showed your photographs. Now you can share it. You can be contact. You don't feel so far away. But I think that's the world's changed anyway, and it's more connected. So that leads to that level of it's now more connected when you do that. But I think one of the youth expedition sort of market, schools expedition market, has definitely constricted since COVID. And I don't know whether that's business wise or whether that is less that young people. There has been a change in young people. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here as a greybeard and go, well, it's different in our day, sort of thing. But
30 years ago, but I do think those 2 or 3 years of COVID really had a massive impact on how it funneled children into their phones, because they couldn't go out and they couldn't go on trips.
I'm less. I find I'm less of that sort of. I don't see the phones as a bad thing as on it fully. There's bits of it that annoy me.
Yeah,
there's an element of having to embrace the technology and that change, and rather than I think there's too much where people sometimes say, it's better back in. So I heard someone the other day. Well, it's a bit like someone said, I want us to go back to like we were living in the 1950s, and I'm like, yeah, but medically we weren't particularly sound. Tuberculosis was still a thing.
Blue asbestos in every house, and outdoor toilets and grease-proof toilet paper, fantastic.
Exactly, and it's like, well, you can always hark back and go, it's better in our day. And I don't remember. I personally, my personal view, I don't. I think young people are much more open to stuff these days. I think their access to knowledge and their access to news and it depends which sources they're getting it from, or hopefully multiple sources. But they're more that connection could be more positive. Like, I lived in South London, you lived in North London, but growing up in London in the sort of 80s and 90s, it didn't feel like we had loads of freedom, particularly. Like, you couldn't go anywhere. I think young people these days are freer because they can get more knowledge, but I think they're also restricted, and they don't, depending on where they live, they may not. But I look at my nephews and nieces in London now. They travel over London, crisscrossing London all the time. At a younger age, I think we did. We barely went outside our own little manors, But I also feel that there's, my son here sometimes won't go and meet his mates in town. They'll all catch up online playing games. And I'm like, well, am I happy with this? Am I not happy? I go, well, actually, it's the world that they know,
Yeah, sure.
My son here lives 8-9 miles away from some of his friends. Whereas, where were your
So that,
round the corner? Like you could walk to their house.
yeah, two doors down, yeah, no, and they come banging on your door. Oh, it's Seb.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd go out in your local area straight from there. Whereas here, I know I live a little bit more rurally now, but yeah, their school is 5 miles away, whereas my school was a
Yeah,
10-minute walk up the road. Like, you know what I mean? I think,
yeah,
but I do
yeah,
think they have a wider picture of what goes on in the world than maybe we did. So I think there are
yeah.
elements of that. But then that then leads them that leads, I suppose, to the question of, well, what does an adventurous life look like for them? What do they think is adventure?
Exactly, yeah. It probably looks very different from what we thought it was.
Mm.
And I remember my parents got me a copy of Scott's diary
Mm.
when I was very. It's about that thick. I still got it on the boat actually. It's all kind of patched up. And I remember reading that cover to cover on a few occasions, and that was kind of the height of adventure. Trudging through the snow with your toes slowly dropping off and dying for your country.
Yeah. All right. Mine were novels. Is it Wilbur Smith?
Oh
Novels?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Peter Smith, yeah, absolutely.
there's another one. It's up here actually. I've got it somewhere up there. It's like a whole series of books that were like adventurous kids going off
Yeah,
on adventures. I can't
yeah.
remember.
Peter Smith was famous. He did a lot based in Africa, didn't he?
Yeah, there was another one though, and I can't remember what the name of it off the top of my head. But there's another author that wrote books for young people about two young people going off and catching animals for zoos or something like that. And I but that created imagination though, didn't it?
Yeah.
And, and
And imagination, hopefully, then might make you want to take that kind of first adventurous step to go and join the Cubs. Was another thing I forgot to talk about. That was great fun.
yeah, but they're
That was
the
very
access
cool.
routes, aren't they? They're the access. I joined the Cubs and then went to cadets, but they're
Yeah.
access points. And weirdly, I discovered recently there's 400 and something thousand young people involved in the scouting movement in the UK, and that's 450,000 young people's access point potentially to the outdoors. And I was just going to go back on that bit of like, you get the imagination flowing, and that imagination gives you some inspiration. Because
Certainly.
therefore, if your imagination and your inspiration come together, maybe that gives you opportunity. Maybe it gives you that idea to create something of your
Yeah.
life. And I think that the
But
nub.
that's an interesting point. Actually, putting together an expedition is actually a very creative process.
Yeah.
It does have a level of paperwork, but it is still it's like writing a book or painting a picture. It is incredibly creative, trying to come up with you get from A to B, and you've got to do this, and how you're going to do it, and it's
Narrative. It's an arc, or a narrative arc. Sorry, and it's narratives within narratives, stories within stories, and I think there's a lot in that. And I think you're absolutely right. Like imagination mixed with inspiration.
going back to the books, yeah, inspiration,
And I think that's what maybe that's
yeah, and then
the adventurous bit is in here and in here, as we connect our hearts and our heads to go, because it gives us something. But you mentioned earlier on about people in your life that were mentors to you. How did that inspire you or continue that inspiration?
mentor was John Ridgway, who I mentioned I worked for when I was very young, 16, 17. I worked for him.
Mm.
Him and a chap called Jay Blythe rowed across the Atlantic in 1966 in a minuscule wooden rowing boat, but not covered at all, on minimum rations, no communications, no nothing. The guys they were rowing against in a boat called the Puffin, which was a state-of-the-art boat in those days, aluminium, it's fiberglass, had a cabin, so on and so forth. They were never seen again.
Wow. Okay.
On his return, he left the Paris, and then he set up this adventure school, like basically one of the UK's probably first outward bound schools, called the John Ridgway School of Adventure, right up in Cape Wrath, and it was tough. And I went up there and did a couple of courses as a kid, and then went up as a junior instructor. And then after the first year, a lot of the instructors left because they couldn't cope with John Ridgway, because he was an incredibly tough guy to work for. So So then I then was promoted rapidly to instructor at like 16 or something like that. Anyway, and so this had a massive impact on me. And the one big thing I knew about that is when I left and I went back to school, I just knew that school was an absolute waste of time from that point onwards.
Yeah.
It's just, I couldn't take my teachers seriously anymore. I couldn't take the curriculum seriously anymore. It was, I've been doing much, I felt much greater, tougher, much more grown up stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with him to this day. I speak to him maybe every 3 months or so. I went to visit him last winter. He's he's still up in Cape Wrath. He had a massive impact on my life. But my favorite quote from him was, and this is kind of goes back to this decision making process. He caught me saying one day to one of the other guys I was working with, I said, oh, James, I'll just go with the flow. And John came up to me, he says, everything's through gritted teeth. He goes, McConnell, only dead fish go with the flow. And that's me over the years. So when I come to a decision, okay, what am I, the dead fish, or am I going to go against the flow?
Yeah. No, good. That takes us back to those things.
Very different days, very tough. It was. You had to, really suck it up in those days and deal with it. And but it was, he was my great mentor.
But it's interesting you say about tough in those days and things. It goes back to what we were saying about being greybeards and looking backwards and with sort of rose tinted glasses. I just watched a load of kids the other day. I went up to watch the end of the 10 tours. I've never been involved in 10 tours, and since we've lived here, we haven't really been involved in it. But this year, they're saying like one of the children was doing it, and 600 teams. So 600 teams of, I think, 5 or 6 young people per team, and like 3 days out on Dartmoor, covering 45 kilometres, having also to have to train for it in the months leading up.
Yeah.
With quite strict conditions in terms of what kit you can carry, what level it has to be at, like where you have to go, how unsupported, is still tough. Like, it's still tough. Even the kit, it's still your feet in a pair of boots. Like, the boots may be better than they were when we were kids, like old army boots and things like that. People wouldn't be seeing dead wearing these days. But I think that those things still exist that are tough.
Absolutely.
And I'm not pushing toughness as a marker of adventure either.
No, me neither. I'm just saying, was kind of making a difference. It's very different now, in that, I was working away in Cape Wrath at 16. I didn't speak to my parents for the whole time I was there.
Yeah.
I might get a letter maybe once, in an air, something, a little letter. But yeah, so I'm just saying diametrically, it's the world has changed, but I wouldn't have wished it any other way.
No. And I think some people will enjoy it. Some people won't enjoy it. Some people, hopefully everyone will learn from these things, and then choose whether they wish to continue it or not. People always, is whether they wish to continue doing it. But unless people have access to it, and you had access to it, I had access to it through the cadets. It gives you the toe in and the toe in the bit, and then having those mentors, the people that will. When you go back to you saying about being asked about how do you get into it, I always feel there's an opportunity to maybe mentor somebody. Like I work on the mentor scheme for the Mountain Training Awards anyway, so I do more formally mentor people trying to get into the outdoors as a practitioner, as an instructor. But I think the unofficial mentoring of young people or people that want to go in, whether that is through, and you mentioned Explore earlier at the Royal Geographical Society, like every November, there's a good opportunity for people to network and get some support. But I think that ongoing mentorship, I do find that, I suppose now getting a bit older, that there's an opportunity, maybe there's opportunities for that to help mentor young people to outdoor practitioners.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentored Tim Davis, but his life circumstances have completely changed. He's now married with children. I don't think he's going to be doing much in the way of trudging across deserts in the future, but you never know. But yeah,
the thing isn't it? Do we mark people on their ability to keep doing things, or do we go, people's life changes, They may have done some amazing stuff here. They then go through this amazing stuff that may not be as adventurous, but then does it change the spirit?
Yeah, maybe.
There's lots of people that, have done lots of great expeditions that then sort of seem to retire away to go and get proper jobs and, have families and things like that. But do they stop being adventurous? I suppose in some ways it's whether or not they continue to keep playing on their past successes. I think one thing you and I have never really done is, you mentioned about winning awards for expeditions, but
that was never really, didn't really do it for that, and didn't really never do it for the money. It was always the challenge of pulling something off.
Yeah.
So it was last year. My big challenge for 5 years was putting together a paramotoring expedition across Namibia, and that's how long it took to plan it. And yeah, that was my my sense of achievement was actually the fact I managed to do it.
Yeah, it's nice to get paid for it. It's nice to be able to keep living, keep putting food in the freezer. But I think but then if someone comes back to doing it later on, they go, well, actually, I took a hiatus because I wanted to have kids or what have you, and I wanted to do their life, and then I would go back to it. That doesn't mean they've lost their adventurous spirit. I think some the annoying bits are the people that necessarily, make a big thing about being an adventurer, and either the adventures they do may not be that adventurous, but that's another determination of what is an adventure in the first place. And then they stop it, live off the heroics of that era. Yeah. And then never come back to it, but live off it forever and end up on the speaking circuit making thousands of pounds of something they did when they were in their 20s. But anyway, that's a bit of professional jealousy. Mentoring of people, I think mentors are super important. When I did my master's,
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
One of the things that came out of that was the importance of mentors in the role of helping develop novices to experienced. So it was one of the 6 themes that came out of the research, and so that sort of proves every single person I interviewed for that thesis mentioned something about mentoring, whether that was a mentor in their life that either practically been a mentor, like physically helped them and mentored them, or has been like an inspirational mentor. So one girl had the fact that she had a youth worker or someone that said to her after a canoeing session, "You'll be really good. You're really good at this. Why don't you think about doing it as a job?" Or something along that lines that then provoked that in her.
It'd be boosting you as well, because it's something that your parents, you may not want to hear from your parents, or you may not feel as sincere from your parents, whereas from an outside third party, somebody who who's taking under their wing, if they say it, you actually feel it to be true.
Yeah, but also I'm not sure. I don't think my parents even still really understand what I do or what motivates me to do what I do. I think I definitely think for the last I haven't heard my dad either offer me a job that he had seen pop up somewhere or in a paper suggest I maybe do that. That probably hasn't happened for about 10 years, and he hasn't asked me when I'm going to get a proper job for a bit either. So, maybe they have come to terms with the fact that I've managed to keep this going for 25 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's when my dad says, "Have you thought of becoming a long distance truck driver, son?" It's like, no.
Yeah. My dad's favourite was always, there's some really good jobs in local government. Right, yeah. Like what? Road sweeper? Dustman? That's probably about the jobs I'll probably end up to be the most interesting jobs to do in local government. But I think his idea was I'd be working in a housing department behind a desk and a computer, and it was a nice steady job. But
pension, 9 to 5, yeah.
I don't mean that in a critical sense. The idea is like it's a world that they don't understand either. So
absolutely, yeah.
Same, understand that. And it must be scary as a parent to think that your child is going to go and do something that doesn't seem to have any basis in anything. And
it's because you don't understand it. You don't. It's potential threats. It's overseas. It's the great unknown.
Yeah.
I don't think my parents worried that much at all, to be honest with you. They were happy to send me away at 15, 16 years old. So.
Well, my parents have never really travelled abroad, so whether they understand, I think they might find it difficult. I don't know. I've never really. I think my mum maybe thinks it. I did one of those things years ago when it's those memes that used to be like, "This is what my friends think I do. This is what I was doing a talk."
That's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's very funny those. Yeah.
And I had like this is what my friends think I do. And I had a picture of Bear Grylls eating a snake. Like all my mates that I grew up with all probably think that's what I do. And then what my mum thinks I do, and it was like a guy slacklining with no safety harness between two mountain peaks. And then this is what my wife thinks I do, and it was like a picture of a bloke on a beach surrounded with like half naked girls drinking beer. And then what I actually do, and a guy juggling stationery. Like that's what you feel when you're juggling. Yeah, but I suppose just to come back to the mentor element, I think a mentor could be two things. They could either be very practical and actually help, teaching you things, showing you things, opening doors, introducing you to people. But there's also the mentoring that occurs just inspirational, with people and
just encourage.
Mm.
Encouragement, don't have to actually open doors or actually show you physically how to do something. Just encouragement. You can do it. I believe in you. And it's not coming from a parent who you kind of feel maybe is obliged to say that. You actually feel that this person really has seen something in you and they really believe in you.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot in that. Being, I suppose, as we got older, more people ask for help.
Yeah.
Want some inspiration, or how did you get into? I always find it difficult, as I said, to answer how did you get into it, because I'm saying there's no straight lines, but we'll try to encourage them to, like you said, go and spend time at events in the sector, ask people questions. I think I said it to somebody asked a question once that at the RGS, I was on a panel, and a young lad asked a question about what's your suggestions for how do I get into it? And I was like, ask people for help. I said, if you ask people are generous, and about a year or two later, he rang me up or emailed me or got me through social media and said, would you take me? Someone suggested I need to learn to navigate better. And because you said that in the thing about asking people, I thought maybe I'd ask you whether you. So he came down here for 2 nights. We went out on the moor, camped up on the moor, and did like 2 days of navigation training.
Oh, nice.
Now he's working in Svalbard as a guide, as an Arctic, learning more stuff and asking because he asked people. Not everyone's generous, I suppose. But some people in the sector are generous enough.
People are.
Yeah,
but also the people who, nice people are generous.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a story that can beat that. I had a young lad who came on the very first Namibia expedition on the advance party, and we hadn't the latrines at that point in time. And I'd just gone to bed in my tent, and this lad's banging on my tent, going, Sam, got a bit of a problem. And I opened the tent door, and there's this wall of flame. All the bush is on fire. I go, oh my God. And the wind is blowing it to all of the vehicles, all of the fuel, all the tents and all of the rations. Anyway, we eventually managed to put it out. It looked worse than it really was. And a few years later, I get a picture from Andy Blackmore from Sandhurst standing next to this young lad who's now a captain. I said, that bastard nearly burnt my base camp down.
But that's also the joy of some of that work, particularly when we do work with young people, that like we're only part of their journey, and it's a small part of their journey. They all bounce out. Yeah, they all bounce out into other things. I had a similar one years ago where I'd worked on an alternative education program for like naughty kids, but like kids that were like you and me when we were at school, I suppose, that were sent on a sort of adventurous sort of project. And years later, I was standing in a pub in South London, and this huge geezer turned up standing next to me. I sort of looked up. He had a big neck tattoo, and he was like very muscly sort of guy. He was taller but skinnier than me, but he was quite. You could tell he had that sort of like dark, look. I thought, well, is trouble, sort of thing. And then I ordered a pint, and I was having a drink at the bar, and I got a tap on the shoulder, and I was like, oh, okay. And he went, "Is your name James?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, my name's such and such. I was on a program a few years back that you took us on, and it was really good, and I really changed my life around. I'm like, oh, excellent. And then by that point, I started recognizing who he was. Like, oh, yeah, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. I said, what are you doing now? Then he went, I'm a professional MMA fighter.
Brilliant.
I'm like, okay. But again, you have a moment in their life that we don't necessarily think about the impact that we make as mentors, but actually it can last a long time. Like,
to think about how many people have been on expeditions with us, and how many people you've interacted with, and lives you've changed either in a small way or a big way over in 30 years. I mean, even adults. When we do adult trips, and the Skeleton Coast.
Yeah.
Years ago, they all still keep talking about that, and I think that definitely had a profound effect on them.
So adventure has a huge impact on people's lives, isn't it? Like teaching them about themselves, about the world. I think it's really important in that respect. So it's about how do we inspire adventure and being an adventurous spirit in people to take that.
But also, I think humankind is adventurous in its nature, because we've colonized the whole world, and now we're moving out.
Also, hasn't that to a certain extent been sanitized by the modern world and by people not wanting people to adventure? Because if you adventure, you expand your mind. If you expand your mind, you might question things, and if you question things, then maybe you could change the status quo, and the status quo doesn't want to be changed, so therefore it's pushing back and pushing adventure down. And one interesting thing, and maybe this is sort of as we maybe sort of towards wrap up, I suppose, this chat, but a year or so ago, I did a talk, but that talk was based on some other work that I'd done that was around the etymology of the word risk. And what I understand about the etymology of the word risk is that in the ancient Greeks, if you converted the word into ancient Greek, it meant venture.
Yeah.
So, to venture, to have an adventure, was the almost exact definition in ancient Greek of risk.
That's interesting. Okay.
So it was seen as a positive thing. Right, so it was seen as a positive thing to go out and venture and have adventure, or whether that was conquest or whatever in those days, or to explore. Risk was a positive way, and it was on until the medieval era that the nature of the word risk changed, with the sort of Christian church coming to zenith during the medieval sort of period, and the idea that actually risk was bad, and risk was associated with the devil. And bad things, don't risk. And obviously, a church that wants more people to fall under its spell, it made sense that they changed the meaning of the word, because then people wouldn't question, they wouldn't argue, they wouldn't answer. They would try to find other answers. So risk became a negative thing, and so we're in the post-medieval periods, I suppose, now, where actually we still have this link to the idea that risk is bad, and actually, if we go back in history, the risk was probably seen in a much more positive light, and right back to prehistory, I suppose, in the sense that we had to take risks to survive, and now our world goes back to that point about, have we sanitized the world and taken adventure out of it and taken the risk? Like, people don't want to risk things, and maybe taking that difficult route, risk is scary.
Well, it was an interesting concept. So, do you prepare the person for the world, or are you trying to prepare the world for the person?
Yeah, I don't know. Can we prepare the world for the person? Because
but if you cover the world in cotton wool, but don't train the person, I think that was the concept they were trying to promote.
Yeah, and I think there's an element around that of there's the man-made world, the human man-made world, versus the natural world.
Yeah, sure.
And even 200 years ago, people didn't go into the mountains because the mountains, that's where dragons lived, and that and the gods were up there, and they had storms and things. That don't go there now. We see mountains potentially as more as somewhere more where humans can go and play and find themselves and be part of, and nature's part of that process. So yeah, and I think that's, again, expeditions allow us to play with that a little bit.
Well, exactly, and they have become, obviously, with everything now, sat phones and so on, have become safer. Hopefully, they're still adventurous. But going back to the initial point, so if we go back, so the next time you get a phone call from or an email from somebody saying, how do I get in? How do I do what you do? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I still, every time I hear it, I'm a bit like that. I think I'm very much about similar to what you're saying. You know, don't make any hard decisions, but take a route that feels right to you. But go experience stuff. Go and have experiences. Yeah.
In the UK, you don't have to go to Papua New Guinea on your first trip. You can start.
And actually, that whole thing about journey, like the idea is, if you're going to, you know, if an expedition in its simplest term is a journey with a purpose, that arguable and debatable. But if it's like, okay, well, find something that gives you purpose and create the journey that goes towards it. And I think in some ways that's why I feel that I've sort of created something that's given me purpose over the last 25 years, and hopefully will continue to give me purpose. And maybe that's, sorry, the thought just came into my head that maybe the next purpose is around preparing my son for that world as well, so that maybe is part of that purpose. Anyway, maybe come back to that another time. But I think I'll tell people just to set yourself some goals, like go and, even if it means that you say, well, I've never been to North Wales before, I'm just going to plan a trip to North Wales, and that becomes part of your journey. And you never know, your trip to North Wales in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it could be the, you know,
the mnemonic used to write down for about planning. It was you think about it, talk about it. No, think about it, write it down, talk about it.
Statistics around that, isn't there? I think if you think of something that you want to do and it lives in your head, then there's probably like an 80% chance you'll never do it, right? Because you just thought. Right. If you think about it and you tell somebody that you're going to do it, I think there's like a 60% chance that you will do it, because you don't want to not do it because you've now told someone about it. But if you think about it, write it down as a goal, put it on a post-it note on your wall, and look at it every day, and then you tell people about it and you keep telling people about it, there's like an 80-90% chance you're likely to do it because of all those things. So, you know, thinking about it, writing it down, which sort of rationalizes it, talk to somebody about it, keep talking to people about it. It will refine your planning, and then the likelihood is you're going to go and do it. So
yeah, I was paying attention.
The statistics are probably all over the place. You probably can Google it and find a better one, but I think it's something like that. But it makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense that.
Yeah, 100%. It does, and it was, and yeah. So I mean, okay, so that would be.
A dream is great, but until you make that first step, that can't become reality. So again, it's that back thing to imagination, into inspiration, into action.
Yeah, and you have resources like, well, you've got loads of outdoor spaces here. You have resources like the cadets, the camp, the scouts, Royal Geographical Society, Scientific Exploration Society.
There's loads of route. Like I think but again, it's giving people access to those things and the opportunity that they can provide, isn't it? But yeah, explore at the RGS. Now there's bursaries for that as well, so that if people are thinking of a financial barrier, that can be hit. But I'm sure there's also lots of people that through those organisations that can be contacted and ask questions. And it's like I said to that young lad, explore was, ask people, write to people. Like nowadays, it's so much easier. I remember writing to a very famous mountain guide company when I was in my mid-20s, asking, just like, give us a job, and they were like, "Have you got? Can you cook? Have you got a first aid kit? Do you have a climbing rack?" And I'm like, "Well, I can cook, and I've got a first aid certificate, like that. That's it, right? There you go. You're in.
Let's go."
That was it back then. But it was a written letter to somebody. One of the probably about 20 letters I'd sent out. Now, bearing in mind, I'd been working in the theatre industry before that, so I was used to sending letters on a regular basis and getting no response. You know, buying hundreds of stamps every month was a business expense. But nowadays with email, you can and LinkedIn and stuff, you can find people and send hundreds and hundreds of emails and
Or maybe even still think about sending a written letter just to stand out from the crowd.
exactly, yeah. But I think that talk to people, go and talk. I think I think we probably accumulated a fair amount of knowledge over the years, and I'll always be willing now, I think, to give that knowledge.
I think we're all no, we're not neither of us is keeping it a secret. It's just maybe we don't understand how we got where we are very well.
And both of us are probably at the wrong end of the spectrum for making ourselves a TV career and in adventure TV, and also not that we probably don't like it very much.
Yeah, but also if you decide you're going to become a lawyer, there's a very specific route you go through. Whereas if you say, okay, right, I want to lead an adventurous life, I want to be an expedition leader, this is not really a kind of written path. You know, it is as you said before, it's like a story you have to write yourself.
Yeah, very much so.
You have to kind of grab what you can and along the way and learn as much as you can and experience as much as you can.
And without sounding twee, you've just reminded me, I suppose, of another of those pivotal moments that we talked about earlier. And there was a point, I think I grew up as a youngster, quite scared, like quite fearful. There's lots of things to be fearful about when in life and stuff as I was growing up. And I remember at some point, and I can't pinpoint when that was, it must have been in my 20s, that I thought, I'm going to say yes to stuff. And I know there's a whole campaign around saying yes, but I remember maybe it was getting confidence enough to be able to say yes. Like when people ask you a question, like, oh, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. And some of that came from being in the cadets. Someone once said to me in the cadets, like, put your name down for everything, any course, anything. And that maybe that's what started it, actually. And that was another mentor, the guy who was the warrant officer when I was the adult warrant officer, amazing man. I think I remember him saying to me then, like, put your name down for everything. Any course that comes your way, put your name down for it. I did all sorts of gliding courses. And I'm saying I was quite a fearful, scared child into in my late, apart from up until my late teens.
Most kids are.
Yeah. Oh no, I don't think my life was any more scary than anyone else's.
Particularly brave, minded person. I was,
I wish I was braver as a kid, but then I think somewhere in my late teens, and then into my 20s, when that lesson came back to me again.
Yeah,
actually say yes to stuff. Like just if it opportunity right. And now I say yes pretty much to everything. Like if there's an opportunity, apart from jumping out of an airplane, not doing that, but I'd say yes to most things.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose there's maybe the answer to the question that we've been talking about. Just if it looks scary, do it.
Yeah. Just go for it.
Robbing banks and stuff like that. But but hey, you might become a world-renowned bank robber. So.
Yeah, well, I think there's that thing about you can use your good skills for nefarious. If you had a set of skills, you can use them for your nefarious tasks, or you can use them for good. How do you get people to use their skills for good? There's a great book up here actually, and another one over there actually, which talks about being a good psychopath. That we're all psychopathic in some way, and we can dial up and dial down our elements of our psychopathy. And obviously, some people use it for bad, but some people become great. Like an entrepreneur could be an absolute psychopath, but actually it's doing good in the world because they have similar traits. Like Genghis Khan, I have a brilliant little airport book about Genghis Khan, and they put him up against the emotional quotient, the EQ, and he's really highly. But apart from one area, which is where he killed thousands of people, millions of people, but I think that again, you can dial up, dial down that what your good tendencies and your bad tendencies, because they're all traits and attributes and stuff. They can be used for good or bad, can't they?
So I think maybe what we've gotten from this is you just got to say yes.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
There's it's easy. There's lots of ways to get into it in the UK. It's not like you're stuck in North Korea.
Yep.
You can get into it.
And
And
craft your own story.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Have your own story.
Your own story rather than following a previously well trodden path. Like, I don't think there is
Exactly.
not a well trodden
Always, never take the world. Yeah. Only dead fish go
path.
with the flow.
Yeah, with the
There
flow.
you go. That's